Hey, 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 happy day. Oh, happy day. Yeah. So, happy day, guys. I just wanted to say hi. How are you doing? I hope you guys have had a good week. So, today's topic is imposter syndrome. I do not know what I'm going to title this podcast episode yet, but I still felt it was important to talk about this because while I was meditating on this topic, I just felt like this is something I should share because it's something I've experienced, and I'm not going to pretend every now and then comes up. But the difference between when this first started and now is I have more tools because I learned more about myself. Because I think the biggest thing when it comes to dealing with imposter syndrome is grounding yourself in your identity. And that has been the difference maker I've felt in my life. When I compare when I compare myself, sorry guys, correction, when I compare myself to who I was years ago when I started writing to now, I see that since I know more about who I am now, I'm more confident and it's much easier for me to execute versus years ago. I would still execute, but there would be so much anxiety, so much fear, so much panic in releasing products, releasing services, releasing books. In 2019, if you guys didn't know, I think it's 2019 or 2018, I can't remember the year, but I was writing. I've always written poetry. I've always written music. I love writing. Writing for me is just a way to download my mind onto some piece of paper, right? So in that year, I had written, typed up, and released my first poetry book. When I first released that book, guys, I panicked. I panicked so hard. I said, oh my goodness. I felt super exposed because these were poems I just wrote and kept to myself because this was my way of expressing myself. And if you creatives out there know, sometimes releasing your own creation, it feels a little stressful sometimes, okay? It feels a little stressful sometimes. But as I've grown, I'm finding, yes, there's a level of anxiety when doing something new, but I'm more confident because I know who I am. And when I say I know who I am, I'm not saying I have arrived. No, I'm not saying that. I have not arrived because I don't think I will ever arrive. As a human, as a person, I feel like I am someone, and we as all creatives are people who are always evolving. So even when you think I have arrived, you've just arrived to the level that you need to get to. And then once you master that level, you go to the next level, right? So, imposter syndrome. Why are we talking about this? Let me read you a passage from this book I was listening to on Audible. And yes, guys, I have the physical copy of the book. Don't mind me. Like I told you guys, I am a book collector. Okay, I like books. So, the book is called We Should All Be Millionaires by Rachel Rodgers, and I'm reading from the chapter where she talks about $1 million value. So this is page 126. And she talks about how psychologists Pauline Clance and Suzanne Imes did a study and found that a number of high-achieving women felt inadequate, inferior, and perceived themselves as a phony or a fraud, despite truckloads of evidence indicating the exact opposite. And this was usually accompanied by anxiety, stress, depression, and low self-esteem. When I heard that, it solidified the topic I'd be talking about this week because I was like, oh my goodness, I relate so much to that. For me, when imposter syndrome would show up, it would be high levels of anxiety. And I love the examples she gives in the book. I'll read one to you. She says, imposter syndrome shows up in many different ways. And I'll read one of the ways. So, constantly delivering high quality work to your boss, receiving praise, or even a merit-based bonus, but quietly believing that you don't really know what you're doing, and one day they'll find out. That hit home for me. There are other examples, but I specifically wanted to read that one because it applies both in the corporate world and even as creatives and as writers. Replace boss with client, right? Delivering services to your client, them giving you praises, them giving you all this positive feedback, but quietly believing, oh, it wasn't good enough. Oh man, that sucked. Oh, I'm just a fraud. One day they'll find out. But the thing is, you are delivering your gift. You are delivering a gift, your gift specifically, in the form of a service. And when people pay you for it, they're honoring your gift. So if imposter syndrome is present, I just want to encourage you that continue growing in your identity. And the reason I started off by explaining how I was when I first wrote that book in 2019, 2018, the year that was, and now the main difference is my identity. Right after writing that book, that particular season of my life, 2018, 2019, was a bit challenging because I had so much inner work and self-work to do. Now, did I do it by myself? No, I had support. I had friends who I could talk to when I was having a harder day, but I spent most of my time talking to the Creator, talking to God. And for many of you that don't know, I'm a person that believes in God. If you don't, that's your decision. I just share my experiences and my relationship with Him. So I spent a lot of time talking to God and asking Him to tell me, show me who He was, but more specifically who I am. Because I felt completely lost and imposter syndrome was running wild in my life at that time, okay? I would release something and panic. I was releasing music, I would panic and take it down because I was like, it sucks. Even though people were telling me it's great, I was like, oh man, they're gonna find out I can't sing. Fun fact, I can. But again, that's what I'm saying. Like the anxiety accompanied by the imposter syndrome was wild, okay? It was running crazy. So I wanted to come on here and encourage you guys. Continue finding and getting knowledge about yourself. First, always get knowledge about yourself from the Creator and any other resources He will lead you to. Get information about. One of the ways I was getting knowledge is through books. Guys, I love books. I've been reading books since I was a kid. So the types of books I've been reading is like We Should All Be Millionaires by Rodgers. Helped me as I've been working business-wise. But other books around that time is just understanding who I am as a woman, understanding who the Creator says I am, understanding more about boundaries because I lacked them, right? Understanding the kind of things I like, knowing that they naturally would try to show up, but because my identity was so shot at the time, I would suppress it. So then I was now in the balance of dealing with the suppression I had been doing for years and allowing my natural self to just authentically show up because my mind was so used to suppression, I had to unlearn that, right? So I say all of this to say growing comes from knowing who you are. I feel like authenticity equals confidence. And when we're struggling with confidence, it's usually, I feel anyway, it's usually linked to something we're struggling within ourselves about our identity. Because I've seen drastic differences, like I said, from the person I was in 2018, 2019, the person I am now. I'm not saying I don't have my moments, I don't have my difficulties, but I feel like because I'm gaining a deeper understanding of who I am more grounded and I have more tools in my belt to use when imposter syndrome does show up. When I am having a harder day mentally, the tools meaning my time with the Creator and just reading all these books like Boundaries and reading books about the psychology of money, like books that will help me and enhance my mindset to understand more about myself, understand more about the Creator and what He says about who I am and the world, just going deeper. So I just want to encourage you guys because as writers and as creatives, we sometimes find ourselves, especially as a writer, I'll speak from my own experience. When I have found myself operating in imposter syndrome, what usually happens is I now start trying to write in perfection. What does that look like? It means when I'm writing something, whether I'm writing a story, a book, a poem, I'm trying to write it from the perspective of it being perfect so that the reader finds it pleasing. But guess what? That's not going to be as great as I think it is. Because intellectually, yeah, it could look super great. But when it comes to the authenticity of who I am, it won't register. It won't resonate as well, because when we write in perfection, what happens is we start to inhibit the natural flow that comes out of us when we create as creators. When we're sharing our gifts with people in the form of services and just products, and even just sharing our time with different people, if we're trying to be perfect in our giving of service, whether you're a writer, whether you're an artist, whatever you are, right? But specifically, especially my writers out there, when we start trying to be perfect, we inhibit the natural flow that is in us that wants to come out through this service, through our giving. And I'm saying this from experience, because when I ended up reading what I wrote when I was writing in quote unquote perfection, I was like, it sounds great, but it doesn't feel authentic to who I am. Versus when you write, just write uninhibitedly. You're not worrying about any grammar. You're not worrying about any mistakes. You're not worrying about even the spelling. You just write and let what is in you flow. The authenticity is so bright, it is so warm, and it is so sharp that when you're done and then you go in to clean up, to edit, to tidy up, the final product you have is so powerful and genuine. So I wanted to share this because this is something I've had to learn. Write the vision in your mind. Write whatever it is that you're writing. Create whatever it is you want to create from a space of authenticity. Don't try and get it perfect the first time. Instead, what you want to do, and I encourage you guys to do this, is just release it, write it, create it, and then when you're done, go back in and edit. And I'm sharing this because I actually learned this from a professor in my English class when I was in university. She would say, when you're writing your essays, or when handing in your assignments, just write. Don't worry about the spelling mistakes. Don't worry about the commas, just write. Because you're going to have a better product that way than if you try to write with all the information perfectly in the way you think it's supposed to be versus the way your spirit and your mind are translating and wanting to release the information. So allow yourself to flow. Do not inhibit the natural God-given flow you have in you, that when you create stuff and when you provide services, it just pours out to your clients and to those who are the recipients of what you're giving. And that then is a blessing to them, right? So, and it's interesting that I'm talking about this because I just love how everything's been lining up this week. So I enjoy watching competitive shows like cooking competitions, makeup competitions, just different kinds of creative competitions specifically. When it comes to sports, I'm not a super fan, but creative stuff, you got me. I'll watch it. There's an artist competition, let me know the name of the show, you got me, right? So I was watching this makeup competition on Netflix, and there was a part in the show where there was this one particular artist who had created such a powerful and wonderful look. I was so inspired by the colors. I was like, oh my goodness. Even the judges were like, oh my goodness, that's beautiful. But then there was a moment where when they had finished what they had created, they paused and then looked around and then started adding more. And that kind of took what they had authentically created and changed it into something else. And it kind of took away a bit from the beauty of what they created. It was still beautiful, but when they had created what they saw in their mind, it was much more beautiful than what they had added after comparing themselves to their competition. And I just want to add this little caveat, this little note in today's podcast. When you create something, when you have a vision, create it, but don't stop to look around and compare yourself to everyone else to see if they're doing what you're doing, because the assignment and the things, and when I say assignment, I just mean whatever it is, the gifts you have that are in you that you are created to share with the world, those things are authentically yours. They're no one else's. So the moment you turn around and look around like that makeup artist did, and then start to adapt your authentic creation, you end up kind of in the position I was when I was writing from a place of perfectionism, right? Where I was like it's great intellectually, but it just kind of feels like not fully authentically me, right? So I just wanted to use that as an example because I saw it in the show. I was like, no, oh, what you made was so good. And even the judges in the show said, when you had created it, it looked so beautiful, but then you added this and it became a bit much. Still great, but the original vision was much more powerful than what was adapted or what you added to it, right? So I want to encourage you guys, if you create something and you feel it's done, trust that what you've made is beautiful. Trust your vision. And then if you're in a space or an industry, when you're in a space where you have mentors who are there to help you, know that they're there to support you. So any feedback they give you is to help you, to push you, and to even go deeper and bring out the powerful gift that is in you. So I hope that made sense. I think it did. And I know it did. But if you have any thoughts, any questions, anything you'd like to ask me, I'm going to put a little form in the notes if there are specific things you want me to talk about. But that is all I have for you guys. And I hope you honestly have a wonderful day. And I'll talk to you guys next week. Okay, bye.